Great, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to January 27th Lafayette Design Review Commission meeting. I'm calling to order tonight's meeting. We'll start with a roll call.
Blake Cass present.
Travis Kaiser, present.
Armand Hadilu present.
And John Gray, present.
Thank you. So we have 4 of the 5 commissioners present tonight and meeting the quorum. We move on to reading of the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. I'm going to read the City of Lafayette Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Lafayette is part of the unceded ancestral homeland of the Bay Mihawk people. The Bay Mihawk and neighboring Ohlone people have lived in and moved through this place for thousands of years. They stewarded and shaped this land for hundreds of generations. We express our appreciation and gratitude for this profound legacy, which enhances and contributes to our lives to this day. We will strive to honor this land and strengthen our ties with the Indigenous communities that continue to live and work in our East Bay region as our neighbors and community members. We acknowledge and honor them and their ancestors, elders, and next 7 generations. Now we are going to move on to item 4, adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So we adopt the agenda. Public comments for items not on this or an upcoming agenda and within the purview of the commission. Do we have a raised hand?
Don't raise hands.
Okay, thank you. Item 6A, December 9th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Actually, I have a comment. On, let's see, page 3 of 5, line 42. There is a phrase that's struck, which I don't think should be struck. I think it was accurate that we suggested that removing or disabling the sconces above the canopy at Trader Joe's that would be just lighting the top of it.
Okay.
Was something we wanted to do. That
I
agreeable?
recall that.
Okay. So there's a edit that says it's striking out and said it should stay.
It should stay,
Okay,
please.
wonderful.
Other than that, I thought the meeting looks great and I would move to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 So we adopt the minutes. Item 7A, study session, SS 01-25, Botsback R40 zoning. Request for a study session to construct a 2,624 square foot of 2-story single family home and 567 square foot of garage / basement with a maximum height of 31 foot 1 inches in the Hillside Overlay District at 1718 Relio Valley Road. Tonight we have project planner Arlie Cassidy, please.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So in repeating, we're having a study session on a new single family home at 1718 Release Valley Road. These 2 controls on there. So the property is located towards the north side of town. On the left image, you can see the red outline of the city of Lafayette. It's in the center part of the northern claw. I don't know if that's a local term, but I like to think of it that way. The property is a vacant lot of about 51,000 square feet, just over an acre. It's in the R40 zoning, and it's at the north end and the east side of Release Valley Road. You can see it outlined in green on the right. And again, the red in that image is the city of Lafayette boundary. This shows the subject property. The proposal is shown in dark gray. And actually, excuse me, let me go back one moment just to call out that the owners of this property are also the owners of the property to the north, where there is already a single family home developed. And access to that home is through a driveway that crosses the subject property that we're looking at. Again, the green one that we're talking about tonight is vacant. It does have a half of a carport that's used for that northern property that spills across the property line, but otherwise undeveloped. All right, going back to the site plan, this shows the whole property. It's a long rectangle going uphill to the right from Release Valley Road, which is on the left, downhill below. You can see the curved swoop of the existing driveway coming across from kind of the bottom left corner and meeting that carport I mentioned, which again sits across that northern property line. The proposal actually has a new driveway coming from Release Valley Road off this survey to the north with a separate connection, and the driveway would then come south to the property and connect on the left side of the gray footprint of the building shown here. So I want to show some photos that I took of the site this last Friday. Starting on the bottom left, this is coming up the existing driveway, which is again to the south of the proposal property. You can see the series from left to right coming up that driveway, looking at this open space. That is the proposed location of the new home. And then you can see in the upper left, the existing home with the carport in front. So the property line to the north would be somewhere in the middle of that carport. And then the upper right image is standing on the main flat section of driveway, the existing drive, looking to the east, which is uphill. I want to call out this photo because when you look at the survey, there is a second open area on this property, which is uphill. You can see it's evening. You can see where the light falls above the two trees. And most importantly, the light's falling best on the upper slope to the left, which you can see is quite steep. So there is a second open space on this property, but it's very sloped. Or on the right side is up against the neighbor's property and in the side setback. So originally when I looked at this, I thought, oh, there's this other place where a home could go. It's not the best location. So just calling that out, that there is that slope going. Whereas in the bottom right, the proposed location for the house is a softer slope and more accessible. This is a zoom in of that same survey and proposed site plan, calling out the square footage proposed for each of the 3 floors. There's a basement proposed with 567 square feet, the first floor at 962 square feet, and the second floor at 866, brings us to a total just shy of 2,400 square feet for the total home. And now I'll go through each floor. Here you see the basement. They're showing 3 cars, but I believe there would be room for 4 in a carport setting. These are open columns. There's no garage door. The car would be almost fully under the proposed patio that sits atop it. And then in the footprint of the building, you can see some open space and then 2 fully enclosed rooms on the right, the basement north and south with stairs leading up. The first floor holds the common spaces. This has an entrance on the right or uphill side that's kind of serves as a front door, but is accessed from the other driveway, the existing drive that goes to the other house. And so there are, again, the 962 square feet of interior space, as well as 796 square feet of proposed outdoor deck space. Again, this is sitting primarily above the carport on the left, which is where the driveway comes in, but it does wrap the house to the north side as well, into that front door. There's also an office guest bedroom shown here with a closet. And then at the top, this is more of the private space. There's a master bedroom at the top on the north side with a full bath and closet, 2 bedrooms, another bathroom, and then an office and laundry. So that's the proposed layout of the home. Now looking at the elevations, I actually feel that this is more of the front of the home. This is facing downhill towards Release Valley Road on the west side. You can see again on the basement, there are columns where there's room for probably 4 cars to pull in under that patio and deck area on the first floor. There's a full 3-story presentation at this elevation. And the height, if you recall, we have usually 2 heights. The total height to the very top of the ridge is 31 feet 2 inches. But for our maximum height measurement, we go to the average of the highest roof form. Now, this roof form is actually quite gently sloped, so it takes a foot and an inch off. So our maximum height measures to 30 feet, 1 inch. We'll go through the other elevations here. This is the reverse side, the uphill side on the east. Again, there's a path coming directly towards the viewer in this elevation onto that existing driveway, as well as the stairs going down to the right or north that also connect over towards the existing home on the property to the north. And then that deck again wraps from the door around to the north into the larger area on the west side. Here you can see that shallow roof, just a few feet in difference from highest to lowest. You see the podium, kind of open parking area on the larger downhill side, as well as where that front door comes in, or the, I'm not sure what to call it front, but the main door access, exterior door access on the left side, which is the uphill. You can also see the general grade of the hill. It is sloping down towards Release Valley Road, and the roof, however, is sloping slightly up towards the road. And then finally, the last elevation on the south side. This is, if we were back in the photos on that existing driveway approaching the property from the south, this is what would be seen from that angle. And then one section to see where the stairs sit, how the podium sits, etc. You can see there is a small retaining wall proposed on the far left side of that driveway to keep it level, and then nearly full height retaining wall for the basement level on the right where it cuts into the hillside slope. There were 4 renderings proposed. I picked one. This again shows our angle from the southwest corner. Again, the light gray is the existing driveway, which continues beyond this house and property, kind of to the white space. That's where the existing carport and home sit. And so you can see the existing driveway curving to the right, but then the proposed driveway in the darker gray coming from the north to the property connecting to that carport access area. Staff did receive 2 public comments, both after the staff report was published, so none of them were linked initially into that initial PDF. However, they were in time for our noon cutoff today, and so they were an additional link added, and you should have received an email with that additional PDF. One was from someone calling themselves a concerned neighbor. They called out the driveway placement for the new proposed driveway, deeming it a safety hazard and worried about the environmental impacts of the additional tree removal for that driveway. And then Dale and Marty Godot, excuse me if I'm butchering that, living across Release Valley Road at 1702 Toyon, had concerns about the drainage and runoff for the construction. We're concerned about the additional impervious surface of the new driveway, and also had general concerns about privacy and noise impacts of the house location, which again is to the west of the existing driveway downhill and closer to Release Valley Road. And obviously the deck, which would be outdoor and have more noise exposure. Following the language in the staff report, staff here has called out 4 general suggestions or concerns that we would appreciate feedback from the DRC on. The first is that the house now sits fully vertically. The levels are all stacked atop each other with no setback into the slope, as is called out in the hillside residential design guidelines. So talking about the vertical profile and whether that feels appropriate in the hillside overlay district. The second is the possibility of utilizing that existing driveway and the southern approach. It does seem in the survey that slope would allow for a branching off when approaching from the south of the existing driveway to connect to the home, as opposed to an entirely new driveway with a new connection to Release Valley Road. The third is the observation that the current maximum height is measured at 30 feet 1 inch. In our code, 35 feet are allowed maximum. However, at 30 feet, additional findings must be made for that last 5 feet of height. So if the applicant were willing to, or excuse me, anything above 30 feet. So if the applicant were willing to push the house down or shorten a plate height at the basement by even 1 inch, those additional findings would not need to be made, and they meet the 30 feet initial kind of level for height. Fourth is something that's a little complicated to visualize, but we're talking about stories. Right now, per this definition, which I'll read, of the Lafayette Code for a story, this house actually measures a full 3 stories, and the code only allows for 2.5 stories. A half story is typically a conditioned attic under a pitched roof, or a basement that is more fully enclosed in grade or ground. So the reason this currently counts as a 3rd story at the basement level, the top 2 are clearly stories, is because it has more than 50% of that floor area with more than 6 feet in height exposed to the outside, as opposed to underground. If you picture the uphill side of the house where the retaining wall is, that is fully underground. The opposite side downhill is fully exposed, and the majority of the 2 shorter sides are also more than 6 feet exposed. So that's what brings us to this definition of the bottom basement story being a full story. And so feedback or suggestions from DRC on a solution here. If the applicant came back with this proposal exactly for a full application, a variance would be required for height in this situation. So I will read the definition in case that helps clarify anything. The definition of a story is if the finished floor directly, or floor level directly above a basement, cellar, or unused underfloor space is more than 6 feet above the ground adjacent to the building for more than 50% of the total perimeter, or is more than 12 feet above the ground at any point, such basement, cellar, or unused underfloor space shall be considered a story. And so this proposal meets this definition. And so staff is, this is a study session, no formal action will be taken. However, this is an opportunity for the applicant to hear feedback from the DRC. And so staff has framed these 3 questions. Does the project substantially comply with the residential design guidelines with respect to minimizing impacts from the offsite views and neighbor privacy? Is the proposed project massing and scale consistent with the existing homes in the neighborhood and the sloped hillside setting? And are there any other comments DRC would like to pass on to the applicant? With that, staff's recommendation is simply to provide feedback, review the proposal, provide feedback to the applicant. And again, no formal action will be taken at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Any question for the staff?
Yeah, I do just Arlie, thank you for your explanation on the story. Just a clarification. If the design were to have just additional berming against those end walls, that potentially could solve the problem. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
I also have a question. So can we go back to the site plan? I'm curious, with this new configuration of the new driveway versus the existing. So can we go to the one that's showing the new in relation to the existing?
Or I think the rendering?
Just a site plan that's zoomed out. Maybe if I open the site plan here. Yeah, sheet A1.0. So I'm wondering, with this new one, where is that existing house? Are they still gonna use that existing driveway or?
Yes, that is the proposal. So the existing house, I'll use this
Right.
laser pointer. The existing house sits just here. That's the very beginning of it with some
Right.
stairs. And then this is the carport that belongs to this house, which does sit across the property line.
Right.
That runs here. This is the existing driveway curving down. My understanding is that this homeowner will continue to drive up the driveway
Right.
here, park here, go in. We do have a question from engineering regarding this structure and the fact that it straddles the property line.
Right,
And what they're planning to do about that, which it shouldn't be there. given that this parcel, it's a fully legal parcel, it can be sold separately anytime. Ideally, the carport straddling situation is solved before then.
Right,
And then the proposal for this home is to have this area, this straight line, that's the new driveway.
right,
They don't actually show it, but it would continue to the north.
right. I can see that on this drawing.
Oh, right,
E1.0, yeah.
the old survey, actually, I can pull that up one moment. Over.
And they have already splitted the lots, so these are two separate lots.
There are two separate lots. The one we're looking at is a separate legal lot and
Right.
it can be conveyed anytime
Right.
separately.
Right,
So they don't, this is just a survey,
Right,
meaning
right.
only existing. But it does show, the existing home on the northern lot, separate as the big square that you can see very clearly, and their driveway. The proposed home is approximately here, and the driveway would go here and kind of meet down.
sure. Actually, if you go like page 4,
Mhm.
that's showing both of them. Just one more down.
So this
Right.
unfortunately does not go all, oh yes, this
Yeah.
one, yes. So that does connect there, thank you.
Right.
Okay. And so I did, I drove up this way when I did my site visit on Friday. There is a little bit of a cut into the hillside where this proposed driveway is. And so it wouldn't need a full grading. It's not a very steep slope there. There used to be a road a long time ago. It kind of looks like that. However, we've heard concerns from neighbors about this connection,
Right.
sightlines. You can see it does curve back from the connection, so there's room for the car to be fully perpendicular to the road, which
Right.
would help. But Matt Lottrop, city engineer, has made comments about concerns there, as well as the drainage on this side of the road and how the driveway would cross that, things like that. So there
Right.
are several concerns around the new driveway.
Has there been,
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, yeah. Has there been any discussion about why they are not using the existing driveway to connect? Because if we just zoom or just pan down a little bit, why they are not using the existing driveway to connect to where the new driveway is coming into the new house?
Yeah, I did ask that question. I don't know that I could repeat it and give it justice, so I'll let the applicant speak to that.
Sure.
My understanding is that there was desire for separateness, and then also they felt that there was a good enough connection at Release Valley Road for this home. So, and there was something about connecting to the home and the slope of the driveway. So I'm not sure, we might have been speaking past each other on where the existing driveway would connect.
Mhm.
But I'll let the applicant speak to their ideas
Sure.
about that.
And since on the survey, it doesn't show the trees on the north property,
Mhm.
with that new driveway, are there any trees that are gonna be cut?
I don't know the answer to that. I would assume some.
Okay.
And you'll see too that they did not show an X for a tree removal. I would assume that these two trees that are very close to the
Right.
T would have to come out. And possibly these two as well with
Right.
interference with the drip line there.
Right.
So even if they're weaving through the trees, there's
Mhm.
probably impacts that would
Right.
affect existing trees.
Thank you.
Are there easements proposed for these two driveways?
Yeah,
There would need to be, my understanding is that because they own both properties, they haven't needed an easement currently. I know there's an easement to the south of the subject property line for, the existing home to cross. I don't recall if they have an existing easement on our subject property to cross it. But obviously the new driveway would need easements either direction.
1924.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? So, with that, we are gonna move on to applicant's presentation.
The applicant is here, you can stand up.
Here I am.
Great.
Do I,
Well, if you stand to the podium, introduce yourself and your relationship to the project, and then you have 10 minutes to speak.
okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve Swearingen. I'm the architect working with the Boots Box for this proposed new home on this lower or the south of the two lots that are owned by the Boots Box. First, I'd like to say Arlie did a great job in such a short amount of time and I'm not talking about tonight, I'm talking about how we got the application in, we're able to get today, so thank you so much. And I think you did a really good job explaining what's going on. What I'd like to do is simply just go and bring some more detail into some of these key components that staff has brought up, and starting with the driveway. I'll also speak to trees, and I'd like to, I don't know if I can ask questions, but maybe that'll unwind as it goes. I'm interested in understanding a little bit more about how we do mitigate privacy and buffering around, so that views in and out of that site are acceptable. And that would give clues to how we can continue to modify and detail the design for this house. So one of the primary questions that was brought to the table initially was, hey, why are you having two driveways? What's up with that? So if I can take a second, and I brought a little pointer, if it's okay to point the pointer at the screen, okay.
If you can also describe, we're on Zoom as well, so for
Yes.
listeners at home, they can't see your pointer.
Okay, great. So then I'll just use words. So the presently, there's, as you see, there's a driveway coming from the south that enjoys an easement that crosses another property. And the terrain, as Arlie described, is relatively steep from Release Valley Road to a sort of a middle section where you can see the driveway ends up being sort of in the middle of this parcel. That's a flat, it's about 10 feet above the area where the house is sited. And the house is sited about 25 feet above the level of Release Valley Road. So we've got basically Release Valley Road, call it the 0 point. The driveway and site is again about 15 to 20 feet above the street. And then that driveway arrives in another 10 feet above that.
Excuse me, you're talking about the existing house?
Yes, no, I'm talking about
The new house?
the new house.
Okay,
New house is in the middle
Yeah.
between Release Valley and the driveway.
okay.
And the driveway climbs and turns to the right, you can see in the site plan, and then turns to the left and gets wider there. So the reason why I'm bringing that to your attention is because as you approach the site from the south, it's very steep drop into the place where the house is sited right now. So there's a concern initially and fundamentally by the homeowners and the property owners that to tee off of the existing driveway is going to be technically challenging. When at the same time, as Arlie was describing on the north lot, the existence of a cut through drive was there, and she noticed when she drove by that there is actually a former roadway there. And so the homeowner was thinking, gosh, that would make things easy if we just take advantage of the fact that we've already got grading that's there and basically build a culvert to conduct the drainage and bring the driveway up onto the site along an already existing, let's say, formed site feature, which is a sort of roadway. Go ahead.
Sure. Can I ask, what's the finished grade at basement?
Finished grade at basement is, I forget the first number, I think of it as the 45-foot mark,
So 545?
545.
Thank you.
Yeah, the driveway up is 560 and Release Valley is 525.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, the other fundamental concern about the driveway is the existing southbound or north-south that comes from the south. When it arrives at Release Valley southerly, the visibility coming out of that is very difficult as well. And so what they wanted to do was establish a better visibility at arrival with the way we've shown this northbound driveway. I'm gonna use the pointer really quickly. Well, it's not looking anyway. So you can see the driveway, thank you, right there. We're trying to shape the space, shape the roadway so that we can get a good point of pause before getting onto the roadway, onto the main road, Release Valley. And, you have time check?
Okay, you can see. it's
Yeah,
about
fine.
5 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah, 5 minutes.
okay. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that there will be 6 trees removed and those trees were not indicated with X's and they are not showing on the site plan presently, will have a before after. I would also add that there are no trees indicated on the north property. We would have that modified because there's maneuvers we have to go through to legalize or prepare for the fact that that carport does straddle the two sites. There is intentionality to rectify that and have that handled either as part of our application process or prior to. The home is intended to be a modern take of what's already there. The existing home on the north side, it's one would say it's probably a 3-story situation, although there is no dedicated floor plate other than one single level. And that presents a relatively broad facade as well. And though it's heard that the stepping back to align with the slope of the parcel is duly noted by the design team. Thank you for bringing this. If you hold this here, that'd be great. Let me take you on a quick tour. The lower left-hand corner slide is arrival at the subject parcel. We're facing northeast, and we're about to make the turn onto the site. Well, unfortunately, what the photo doesn't show is a sense of a slope that's occurring. So right where it says study session, lower left-hand corner, we're at about 550. And we're looking at, you can see the back of a car in the middle right of the slide, and that's 560. So we're gonna climb 10 feet right there. And then the picture in the middle, there's actually 3 pictures in the middle. The picture in the middle is we've gone up the driveway somewhat and it's to our right, and we're looking right into the site. So between the trees and the car and the left is that flat where we're intending to place the building.
Sure. And sorry, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So on the site plan, I see 2 trees close by to each other right below that. It's between 545 and 550, and
Yeah.
it seems like those are the trees.
Yes,
The one that we see, okay.
yeah,
The
very,
left of
or
the
they're
driveway.
just on the other side of
Sure.
those trees.
Sure.
And I would add, I believe these are all protected trees. We don't have an arborist yet, but we will be. Because of the fact that we'll be removing some trees in order to execute this project. One of the things that, the third image on the bottom really helps us do is now we're on to this section of, driveway, and we can actually get a really good feel for what the slope or the topography right there is. So we actually aren't, 545 would be to the left of, on the far right picture. There's some, in the middle, there's some dark colored blobs. Just to the left of that would be the 545 level. Just for a reference elevation. Last 2 slides, one on the left. We've arrived up at the 560 level and we're looking right at the side of the house that exists through the carport. Nothing to add to what Arlene's comments were already on the far right, upper right-hand corner slide. It gets very, very steep, the site to the east of the flat of the driveway. Really
So
excited.
that tree has to go. Is that right? in the top
That
right.
tree. No, that tree is not subject to the area. It's not even in the building area.
It's way to the east.
Great.
That's uphill. I would take any other, but,
Okay.
yeah, in 35 seconds. Can you help me understand a little bit more about views in and views out? And thinking about privacy and so forth. Is there anything you might be able to share about that?
Sure, we are gonna just, make our comments, yeah,
Great.
yeah, absolutely, and privacy is one of the main ones.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely,
it's on the list, so.
yes, yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Yeah, so any questions for the applicant? No. Okay,
All right,
thank you.
Thank you.
so we are gonna go to public comments. Do we have any raised hands?
We have at least one raised hand in Zoom.
Sure.
Okay, Deborah Lockwood, Can you please unmute yourself? You have 3 minutes. Deborah Lockwood. You can unmute yourself. Yeah, she's not unmuting herself. She can, but anyway.
Perhaps we can come back and see if there's anyone else that would like to speak.
Sure.
Wait.
Actually, I have one question for you. So looking at the plans, I see that from the basement, so we do have the stairs that they go up, but I don't see any doors coming out to that carport, from that west facing elevation.
They're all shown closed right now.
Yeah, so those are all shown like windows.
That's how it appears on the plan of view.
Right, right.
The
But you're
intention is
intending
that
to
there will
open
be
them.
doors, and that would be how one would arrive at the home from their car.
Right, right. Thank you. Okay, have you resolved that yet?
She lowered her hand. So Deborah, do you want to speak on this item or not?
Yes, yes,
Yes?
yeah, I had
Oh.
trouble. Hi,
Okay. Go ahead.
my husband and I are neighbors. We live a little bit down, but across the street. And we walk that way quite often. And the driveway that is being proposed, we think has both safety hazards, the way that it's positioned. And I'm not sure that what the architect said about the slope is actually true. I mean, we've lived here 2.5 years and I know the slope of the land, and I don't think it's a big drop off of the existing driveway to the proposed new house. So that's my concern, is I don't think that if they put the driveway, the new driveway in off of the older one, the ones that's there now, I don't see the big drop. And if you look at the topographical map, you don't see the lines thing together, which indicates a very sharp drop. They're actually pretty far apart coming off of the existing driveway. And I guess for us, the visibility of the new driveway is a big issue because our driveway is just near there, and it's already a big problem with the cars coming and going. And then putting more cars, they're going to have to make a 180-degree turn to get onto Release Valley Road. And we see that as problematic.
Deborah, are you done speaking?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm
Thank
done.
Thank you. So applicant has 5 minutes for rebuttal. Do you want to rebuttal the public comment?
For study session, I don't think it's necessary. I think duly noted. Thank you, Deborah.
Okay, thank you. So I actually have one more question for the applicant. In terms of the cut and fill, do you have an estimate of how much you're cutting?
Yeah, we're intending to go balance,
Okay,
and we're expecting that our total grading is in the neighborhood of 100 to 125 cubic yards.
okay,
So more than 50.
right, but it's gonna be net.
Yeah, we're
Zero.
intending,
Okay.
we're intending to make it land as a net.
Okay, and can you just explain where you're putting the dirt back on this site where you're,
Absolutely. If you could go to the section view. Thank you. So I want to walk up there and point. Okay, so this is the tendency of the grade here on the far left, and you can see the tendency of the grade on the far right. And we can just draw a line and connect the dots. And we're intending to fill from this little retaining wall here up into about the balance point, which is around the middle of the patio above. And we're gonna infill here and cut there.
okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah.
Great, so with that, we are gonna move on to commissioners' comments. Who wants to go first?
I can start.
Thank you.
So I think I'd just like to probably reiterate some of the things that are either in things that Arlie said or things that are in the staff report, which I think are worth listening to. First, regarding your variance request, I don't think it's a hard ask for you to adjust that, so you won't have to ask for that. Variance is a little bit of a high bar, and it's nice if you don't have to do that. Regarding the driveway, you know, there are a lot of reasons that we would rather not see a second driveway. You know, additional curb cuts on a narrow road, a narrow sloped road, additional places where cars might come out. The additional impervious surface that creates. Also, quite honestly, it seems awkward for both houses to have extra driveways all around them. And, you know, if I were in either one, it would be nice that there would just be a small spur connecting to the road. There may be some retainage you have to do to make that work in one little short section. I can't believe that it would be that much more elaborate than doing that great big long driveway. And additionally, the little kink that you have to get to the road looks too small for anything but a very tiny car to be able to negotiate. I think that you would need a better radius there. So I hope that you'll give it a shot to try to combine the driveways if you could. I think we already heard that you heard the staff's comment, and I certainly agree. Stepping to be a little more in tune with the topography and to break up the vertical facade, I think would be very helpful. Despite the fact that I know your site is fairly well screened right now, I don't know if those trees will always be there or how much they lose their leaves compared to now. It would be good to accomplish some setback into the slope. And finally, one of the things that we look for to help understand both privacy and view to and from other homes is a small scale site section that's accurate, that shows your neighbors in whatever direction they might be. So between the two homes that we're talking about here, whatever's across the street below you, and if there's anything else up above you, and I think I saw there is, understanding the sight lines, we found the clearest way to do that is with site sections. And that will give you an idea if screening could help or if massing adjustments could help. That's something we ask of everyone. Other than that, I mean, I think it has the potential to be a very nice looking house, and we look forward to seeing it just, you know, meet some of these concerns.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I agree pretty much 100% with John and what was in the staff report. You know, the verticality needs to be worked on. The driveway, I think the turn that you're gonna have with the second driveway is almost the same as the turn you have right now in the first driveway. So it's, especially when you're going north, it's a sharp turn, and you want to pull yourself almost into the oncoming lane, you know, to make that, because it is a sharp turn. So I really am looking at eliminating the second driveway and combining the two driveways. As far as visibility goes, that you were saying, right now, it seems like I went to the site, it seems pretty screened. I mean, I was a little perplexed about the people down on the other side of Riley's Valley, you know. Are you really gonna see that much, you know, privacy, so on and so forth. But again, if you do a section, we can see what the intermittent trees are, and it's really hard to identify with the study session plans, the trees and what the configuration is gonna end up being. So I'm not overly concerned about the comments about noise on the deck and stuff like that. The distance is pretty good. As far as drainage goes, the comments that were made about drainage is that you'll have to have some retention on the property. And actually, from that standpoint, it should actually improve the drainage, you know, put less down across the street on the other side.
Thank you. Commissioner Causer.
I would agree with both my previous commissioners' comments. Doesn't have to be repeated, but the driveway is gonna kill you. Just figure out a way to work that out. I think one thing that hasn't been noted is your lighting. From this view, I would just put extra thought on that, because if people are already talking about privacy and they're really gonna get upset about light spread. But yeah, I think the house looks great and it belongs there. It's just a matter of how you get the neighborhood to feel comfortable with it.
May I
Thank you.
tag on Commissioner
Please.
Cowles? I think Commissioner Cowles' comment regarding lighting is actually a very good one. You'll see in the requirements for properties in the Hillside Overlay District, exterior lighting has to be dark sky compliant, meaning it's shaded and directs the light downward. If you've got a lot of glass in your facade, I think there's a similar issue with interior lighting. If you wouldn't want a big glowing pendant in your window, for instance, you'd want more downlights. So thank you for that, Travis.
Thank you. I agree with all the comments from other commissioners. I also think that staff has done a really great job with the suggestions that they made. In terms of the siding and massing, I think in general, you have done a really nice job, with the location of the house, how is it kind of sitting and tucked into the heel, and the siding looks really good. One suggestion I have, if you step back more towards east on the upper floors, the entry level and the second level, I think that's gonna really help. Just creates a better relationship with the landscape, and it's just gonna minimize the kind of the view down the hill, just gonna break down the massing a little bit more. Other than that, I think, everybody has covered all the comments. Because it's a study session, so we are not gonna vote on the project, we are gonna move on to the next item. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
sure. So we are gonna move on to item 9A, new public hearings, HDP 15-22, Moyle R10 zoning request for hillside development permit, design review and grading permit to demolish an existing 1,232 square foot single family home and construct a 4,012 square foot single family home with a maximum ridge height of 36 ft 8 inches, requiring 120 cubic yard of earth movement, 120 cut, 0 fill in the hillside overlay district at 2 Dulles Park. Project planner is Nicole Zito, please.
1 second while I
Sure.
access that information.
Thank you.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole Zittle. I'm the project planner for HDP 1522, GR 1424 Mayall, which is for a hillside development permit and a grading permit for a new construction at 2 Dulles Park Road. Perfect. So for some context, the subject property is located in the north central portion of Lafayette. To the south, we have Highway 24 and the BART parking area. Zooming in to the right to get some more of a neighborhood context, the subject property is along a private road situated in the middle of a cluster of homes of semi-irregularly shaped lots. From this perspective, we are standing at North Thompson Road, looking east uphill towards Dulles Park Road. I've highlighted the subject property in green. And this is just to give some context of the visibility of the existing home and show how the site slopes down towards the west. These images kind of further show some context of the existing condition. in looking at the two images on the left, that is viewing the existing home from Dulles Park Road. One's the upper one to the left, straight on from the road. The other below, you are moving more towards North Thompson Road. In the upper right image, we are standing on the second story of the existing residence, looking north toward the rear of the property. And in the image below that, we are at the top of Dulles Park Road to the east, looking down towards the west, viewing that western elevation of the existing residence. So shown on the screen is the existing site plan. The existing house is approximately 1,200 square feet. It's a 2-story single-family residence that is sited close to Dulles Park Road. And what this application proposes is to demolish that existing house. Perfect. And in its place, construct a larger total floor area combined 4,012 square foot, 2.5-story home. This proposed residence would have an expanded building footprint and pad area, and it would be sited further away from Dulles Park Road, but closer to the side and rear property lines. In the site plan, we can see that the building area is mostly built out to the buildable envelope of this irregularly shaped lot. So focusing our attention on the design and the elevations, what is shown before you is the existing front of the home and then the proposed elevation to the front, which is south. The proposed residence does offer articulation on all elevation facades, exemplified by the elevation on the screen. The covered porch is incorporated into the massing, and there are details which help break up the massing of the residence. As Arlie had mentioned in her presentation, there are 2 ways in which we measure height. One of which is for compliance with the zoning code. This is in the R10 zoning district, which allows for a 35-foot home. That's measured to the average, let's call it roof pitch of the home. For this proposed residence, that would be 29 feet 10 inches, which is below the 35-foot zoning regulation. But we also, for design review purposes, measure to the maximum ridge height. And for this residence, that would be 36 feet 8 inches. And the structure is sited at a higher elevation than Dulles Park Road. And staff does find that that siting can contribute to the overall apparent height of the residence. But also the applicant has done a great job of using dormers and molding, providing some shadow relief, and there's good fenestration to break up the stories. So this is going to look at the rear elevation to the north. We are viewing part of the elevation to the right is what you, if you were standing right on to the north, what you'd be viewing. I'm sorry, if you're standing to the south, what you'd be viewing. And to the left is a skewed elevation, which is facing more northeast. This portion of the residence, the skewed area, is stepped back from the rear property line, so it doesn't create a full plane along the rear facade. And I also want to point out at the right of the image, you can see that the second story on that western portion is stepped back from the first story, which is encouraged for second stories in the Hillside Overlay District. And I really want to focus in on this elevation. This is the side elevation to the west. We can see that the applicant has done a good job of stepping back the stories, creating a variation of planes. However, this is the most visible elevation, more specifically to neighbors at 1 Dulles Park, which are to the west and sit at a lower elevation. In the upper right image, that is taken from the perspective in the yard of One Dulles Park. They're looking at the western portion of the existing residence, and we can also see where story poles are, kind of the proposed outline of the new residence. Staff does acknowledge that the second story is stepped back, so to kind of remove those windows being so close to the property line. And to help minimize some of the privacy impacts, staff does have a few recommendations. One is to have that window that staff has highlighted in blue to be reduced sized. One, to match that other proposed window along that elevation on that kind of main story. And second, potentially to help reduce sight lines, you know, how much sight can go into the neighbors out One Dulles Park Road. I also want to call to attention what is highlighted in yellow at the top. That is the proposed roof pitch for a vaulted ceiling at the uppermost story. That does kind of, staff finds, contribute to the apparent height of the building because it is steeper. So a recommendation to maybe reduce that apparent height would be to lower that pitch to kind of hunker down the roof and potentially lessen the, you know, apparent tallness of the structure. And like I said, this is some staff comments, and, you know, staff is seeking design review commission recommendation on privacy impacts and also ways to lessen the apparent height. Moving on, I have shown the site sections as Commissioner Gray had explained. Site sections are a great way of showing the relation of the subject property to neighboring properties. So first, I want to call attention to the section in the lower left-hand corner. That is it's oriented west-east, and we are looking north. So here's the subject property. Here is One Dulles Park Road, which is to the west and sited at a lower elevation. You know, we always want to pay attention to when properties are sitting at higher elevations, privacy and sight lines. And so this section kind of shows the relation of the proposed residence upslope to this residence downslope. In moving to this upper right sections, I first want to, I want to call attention to this north-south section. Looking east, you have the subject property to Dulles Park Road. If you're looking north upslope, you have the residence on North Thompson. There is existing vegetation and a fence there that does provide some screening. That is also a neighbor that would be, with this proposed residence siting, be closer to that second story. But staff finds that there is sufficient reductions of privacy for neighbors to the north. So in looking at the proposed colors and materials, overall, the design is consistent with the surrounding neighborhoods. The proposal is some slate gray shingle and horizontal siding with white window trim. There is some accent of color with the stained garage door and front door. The applicant has also proposed some stone cladding along the basement and the garage, which helps to break up the stories and provide some interest. And there are down shielded lights on the garage to minimize light emittance from exterior lights. The guidelines of the hillside, residences in the hillside overlay district, there are certain design guidelines that encourage muted, more earth tone colors, and overall staff finds that the proposed colors are in keeping with that guideline. Now wanting to move on to the grading plan. This project does propose 120 cubic yards of cut to be off-hauled, and that is to be confined to the building footprint and to enlarge the existing basement area. Staff did refer the plans to our city engineer, and he reviewed the project and had a couple of outstanding comments on the new retaining wall and its structural engineering and impacts to the residences upslope to it. And asked for a new geotechnical report to support what this retaining wall is proposing to do. Staff did discuss with the city engineer and confirmed that these comments can be complied with and satisfied in the construction drawing phase after entitlement. However, staff would still condition these comments in the conditions of approval to ensure that the engineer's comments are being met. And now looking at the proposed landscaping, there are three non-protected trees proposed for removal, one being directly impacted by the new building footprint, another by the rearranged driveway, and the one to the north that is just in close proximity to the building footprint. They propose 4 new trees, 2 valley oaks and 2 Marina strawberries in the front of the residence. They also propose new landscaping comprised of mainly drought tolerant, moderate maintenance plantings. These additional trees and the landscaping do create some visual interest, and the trees would provide some screening and canopy of that yard. Staff did refer the plans to our city landscape consultant, who did provide comments on tree protection, adequate tree protection, fencing, how accurate the plans show the existing vegetation on site, and then some comments on the proposed vegetation. And in consultation with the applicant, they are going with their arborist and landscape architect's recommendations. Before we leave this slide, I do want to call out what I've highlighted in blue. So that is the western portion of the residence. And you'll kind of notice there's like a kind of blank spot in the proposed landscaping. This is, I had previously mentioned, some opportunities to create or lessen the privacy impacts to the neighbors at 1 Dulles Park, who are sited at lower elevation down here. Staff finds this as an opportunity to maybe provide some additional screening plantings. But staff seeks DRC's recommendation on that, or feedback on that staff's recommendation, and then any additional ways to mitigate the privacy impacts. Staff sent notice to neighbors within 300 feet of the project and did this physical postings in the vicinity 10 days, or I guess, let me rephrase that. At least 10 days before this hearing date. Staff did receive 3 public comments that were received after publication of the agenda today before noon, and they were provided as an attachment to the agenda and provided in an email to commissioners. One was a letter of support from the neighbor at 1098 North Thompson Road, which is directly across Dulles Park Road to the south. They both support. Staff also received 2 letters from neighbors at 1 Dulles Park Road to the east, 1108 North Thompson Road to the north, who both voiced concern over privacy impacts to their home and the apparent height of the proposed residence. So staff's recommendation for this meeting is to discuss and to continue the project to the next scheduled DRC hearing date of February 10th to allow the applicant to respond to staff comments and any DRC comments as part of tonight's hearing, included but not limited to lowering the upper story roof pitch, modifying first story windows on the western elevation, reducing their size, and providing screening landscaping along the western property line. I would also like to note that in my staff report, I mentioned how this project had gone through a previous application that was withdrawn, that had gone through a few design changes and iterations. And there were some commissioners who were there at that time who are not here now. And that this, I think, is when we have demo rebuild, it's a great opportunity to provide comments on these demo rebuild residences. But thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for the staff?
None.
I have a question. In terms of the square footage and the size of the house.
Yeah.
This new proposal, how is it different from the previous one that came to DRC?
Ooh, that's a good question. I believe when it came before the DRC, this was back in 2020, I believe the proposed areas are the same.
Okay,
The main changes that resulted from the previous submittal to this is a lot of the design
got it.
and landscaping
Exterior, yeah.
changes. But I think, oh, yes. Oh, thank you.
Smaller now.
It's smaller now?
That, yeah.
Okay.
Because of the setback on the second.
Perfect, okay.
Second story.
The second story with the reduced setback minimized the
Sure.
floor area.
I'll get to that. What's that?
Oh, I will get to that.
Perfect, sounds great. Thank you. So we're gonna go to applicants for presentation. You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yes.
Oh,
Up
Thank
to
you.
10 minutes.
The applicant provided
Thank you.
material.
This is the previous design. Thank you.
Yeah,
We've been at this little project for about 5 years now. I first came to Lafayette 50 years ago. I lived on Thompson Road, North Thompson Road, right around the corner from this house for 30 years. I've designed 4 other houses in the neighborhood. So I'm quite familiar with both Lafayette's design guidelines and what I think is appropriate for that neighborhood, which is actually has no underlying theme. They were all individually built custom homes over the years. The houses at number 1 and 2, Dulles Park, are the only 2 left from the original builder who built them in the 30s. The house that I lived in at 1109 North Thompson Road was one of the last he built in 1950. I tore it down and built a new one in its place. So by now these houses, those 2 houses are falling apart. And it's time to re-up, renew, refresh them. The first handout I gave you was where the client started about 5 years ago. What they wanted was sort of a French country house, which in my experience with design review, I knew would never fly. But sometimes over the years, I've had to use the design review process as a hammer on the client to get them to do what's really appropriate for the neighborhood. And that's kind of what I did here. He's shooting me. So we redesigned it, responding to comments from design review, making it a little smaller, setting the upper floor back, providing more articulation on the walls, a variety of materials. And so now it's sort of that Bay Area shingle style that was derived from some of what Maybach was doing 100 years ago and fits in with the oak trees and things that are much of Lafayette. So we've been trying to respond to the various comments from various iterations of the design review board. And we can understand the concerns of the residents of number 1 Dulles Park. But on the other hand, they've had a house hanging over their heads for 80 years or 90 years. So by stepping it back and orienting windows as best we could, we understand their concern. But on the other hand, they've also handled their own landscaping. They have grapevines over their patio in the summer for shade, but it also provides privacy for their patio. And because of the change in elevation difference in floors, the views from number 2 Dulles Park really look way over the top of number 1. So you almost have to stand on your head to look down on their house or their patio. Number 3, Dulles Park, the only windows on that house are the garage windows. And he's actually put blinds on those windows so that the sun doesn't fade his cars. So that one is kind of irrelevant. The one on North Thompson Road is screened with existing mature plantings, mostly on their property. And we have the one oak tree that we're saving on the north side of number 2. And at the request of the staff, we have an arborist on board we've been working with. And we modified the patio and a couple of door locations to move traffic away from that tree. And she also recommended removing some fill that accumulated around the base of the tree, and Phil has already removed that. So, and then the landscaping, Nicole pointed out, there is kind of a blank spot there on the side of the garage. We'd be happy to fill that in, add a couple more trees or whatever the staff feels that is appropriate there. As to the retaining wall, we have contacted, we've been working with a soils engineer who will advise my structural engineer on the design of the retaining wall we're proposing, so that it has no negative impact on the wall above that divides number 2 and number 3 properties. So after all this time, it seems like most of the comments were not appearance related so much as privacy and maybe scale related. And we feel that we've been trying to address those concerns as best we can. So after all this time, we're hoping that maybe we can get some resolution here tonight. The comment about the roof pitch, I prepared a little sketch for you showing some alternates. What I try to do, the steeper roof pitch does 2 things for us. It allows a lower plate height, which lowers the visual height of the wall from the outside, but still gives us adequate headroom inside with a vaulted ceiling. If we go to a simple 4 and 12 pitch, it actually would raise the plate height 8 inches or so. We'd have to use much larger lumber for the framing because I can't use roof trusses then. And we'd have to use foam insulation, which isn't very environmentally friendly either, in order to meet the energy standards. If we go to a standard 8-foot ceiling height with roof trusses and a 4 and 12 pitch, that raises the plate height 16 inches, which makes the apparent height from the outside even worse. So I don't think that's the way to go here. It would also make the design of the house more bland because you're looking up at it, you almost wouldn't see the roof at all. So that would provide more emphasis on the height of the wall without a roof on top as a cap.
So you're currently at 6'8" at the perimeter of those 2 master bedroom,
Correct.
bedroom 3.
Correct.
Okay.
And then with a 4 and 12 ceiling pitch.
Right.
And I've tried to explain that to several iterations of the board, and they didn't seem to get it. So I hope these drawings help explain where I am.
Yeah, that's clear. What's the height underneath? The floor below,
The
9 foot
we have a
clear.
9 foot on the main floor.
Right.
The, we also stepped the, house up the hill a bit to minimize grading and also in response to the design guidelines. We dug the garage in. Well, the existing house already has a basement parking, but it's very small.
Right.
Again, to try to keep the height down.
Right.
So we crammed a gallon into a quart container, but without having to ask for any variances in setback or height here.
Sure.
So if we have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant? I have a question. On the south elevation, it's clear on the rendering, if you could just go to the rendering. What was the reason you're not putting windows at the stair that goes up? Did you have a privacy concern or can we go to rendering? It's,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
There was a.
Thank you. Is it a compositional thing or privacy?
Yeah, it was more composition.
Yeah.
To keep the rhythm of the
Dormers and.
dormers going.
Sure.
And the stairs are quite complex,
Mhm.
so there wasn't any good way to get, windows that followed them, because they're going away from you when you're looking
Sure.
at the south floor, both up and down.
Sure.
So it seemed more important to keep the exterior rhythm going than interior.
Sure. Thank you. So with that, we are gonna move on to public comments. Do we have, did you get the
We have
papers?
any speaker slips. So
Okay.
if anyone would like to comment on this topic, you can fill out a speaker slip and hand it to us.
Thank you. And while we are doing that here, do we have any raised hands on the Zoom?
We got 4.
Okay, so maybe we'll start with the Zoom and then come back to the room. Thank you.
Okay, first, okay, we'll start with Anu and Katil Gupta. Can you please unmute yourself?
Oh, hi, thank you. This is Anu and Katil Gupta. We're the neighbors at $1 Park Road. Yeah, we certainly welcome renovations to $2 Park Road. I think the architect made a comment that our house was falling apart. That's certainly not true. We've restored our property in the scale of our neighborhood, so we're very proud of that. Our main concern is regarding the significant loss of privacy with the proposed massive expansion of $2 Park Road, particularly as pertains to the western facade directly adjacent to our home. Presently, $2 Park Road directly looks into our home. It's upsloping. Our home directly looks into their home, including from many areas: our outside living area, the master bedroom, the dining room, the kitchen, our upstairs. It's a very highly visible structure in its current form. We were honestly taken aback by the new proposed project, including by emphasis on by the story poles, which you can see there. It's really a very significant expansion along the western facade, now a 2.5 or 3 story structure. We sent some supporting photos as well, which I think more accurately shows the proximity of the proposed structure to our property. There's an artist rendition there that shows almost looks like a park between our two properties, but it's directly next to it, and there's a fence there that's not entirely accurate. Again, we would highly encourage and support renovations, but we really would hope this would be significantly rescaled to address privacy concerns and really the character of the neighborhood. That's our only comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public comment.
Next up, we have Ravi Reddy. Can you please unmute yourself? Hello? Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So I thank you to the commission for considering this again after 5 years. My family owns number 4 Dulles Park Road, so that's uphill, about 50 feet away at our closest point. And so we have been watching the proposed development here. Yeah, you can see us right there at number 4. So we have the newest house on the block. It's a modern design. What I am very impressed with are actually the erection of the story poles, and that has given us a lot of ability to visualize the new construction. What I'm also very happy with is the existing house is basically right on the road. And it's quite an eyesore. It's definitely not an enhancement to the neighborhood, if I may put it that way. What I am happy to see here is that the new house will be further back. They're not asking for any variances. It's nicely stepped up the hill, just the way we did with our project. And actually, I'm looking at what's on the screen right now, and that is not a representation of our house. It's actually much more stepped up the hill. It's not just a square block like that. So that's, I don't know where this drawing came from, but anyway, we're definitely in support of what the Mayo family is trying to do here. I'm also, I would like to just make a comment that I was very disappointed to not see this approved 5 years ago. And I understand the comments and concerns about people that are on, a tiny lot right below this. But they're asking for privacy concerns, and they're on one of the most constrained lots that I've seen in Lafayette. If you were that concerned about privacy, you could have bought acreage somewhere else at a much higher price. So I think that needs to be factored in. There's no request for variances here. And I just would absolutely, on behalf of my family, welcome this kind of investment into the neighborhood. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Next public comment.
Next up, we have Pamela Halloran. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, yes, this is Pamela Halloran. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we own the house at 5 Dallas Park Road, which wasn't mentioned. It's another one of, I guess you could say, original houses on the street. And I think I've been there longer than anybody that's currently there. My concerns are in regard to the impact of the construction phase and then to the visual appeal of the ultimate structure. I've owned my property for about 35 years. When I purchased my home from the original Denman family, it was 5 country cottages. And I loved the charm of the area, and I dreamed of each being renovated over time. The Mayos purchased number 2 Dallas Park about 32 years ago. Since that time, they've made absolutely no visible improvements. I've made overtures in the past looking for cooperation about the condition of our private road, of which we each own and are responsible for 1/5, but they have never responded. It worries me tremendously that they would do something to jeopardize something about the state of the fragile road and render it impassable. Visually, I think the proposed house is way too big for the size of the lot. I feel that at 36 feet tall, it would be way beyond a tolerable height, looming over the road and neighboring homes, which would be an eyesore in my opinion. I am also greatly concerned about the integrity of the hillside. The land has been creeping downward, and I feel like the added weight would be problematic. If I owned number 3 Dallas Park, I'd be even more concerned. While I'm no engineer, this has been my observation and concern. As a real estate professional in Lafayette for over 30 years, I've felt that the highest and best use of that property has always been to annex it either to number 1 or number 3 Dallas Park. Our hope is that you not grant any variance in height and seek some guarantee about the road, both during construction and over the long term. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next public comment, please.
Our last public comment on Zoom is David Bear. go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. So I live at 3 Dulles Park Road with my wife and some other family members. We're the property that's uphill. We're between number 2, the subject, and then number 4, where Mr. Reddy, who spoke, lives. And like Mr. Reddy, I strongly support this project. I basically think that the privacy concerned raised by the occupants or owners of number 1 can't really be addressed without drastically reducing the size of the home. I kind of feel like, for the same reasons, that doing something like reducing the roof pitch isn't really going to have very much of an impact. The bottom line of the problem is that number 1 is a 1-story home that's significantly downhill from number 2, and virtually any size structure, including even the existing structure, creates privacy concerns. And I just think it's inherent in the situation of these 2 properties that that's going to be the case. Speaking for myself at number 3, it's correct, as the applicant's architect, forget his name, mentioned, that I do have windows that look out to number 2 from my garage. The blinds are drawn. I also do have a small deck that's off my living room above the garage. And if you walk out onto there, then you're looking directly down onto number 2 from the outside deck. It's built over living space. In any event, virtually any change to number 2, and certainly the current plans, are such a vast improvement over the blight that's there now, that I would certainly welcome being able to look at something different, albeit bigger. It would really be nice to have something that's attractive instead of something that's hideous next door to me. As far as the concerns on the road, I guess that's something new. I think, legally, I'm a lawyer, we all have responsibilities to one another in terms of the road. It's unfortunate that there's not any agreement that's in place between the different owners of the properties on the private road, but there isn't. In any event, I don't really think that the builder would want to create a problem there, and I anticipate that the road will be properly maintained during the construction. So I'm very grateful to see that they've put the effort into this project to make a lovely home.
Thank you.
That's the end of the Zoom speakers.
Great, thank you very much. So,
We have 2 speaker slips in the room. Katie Bale, go ahead. If you can step up to the podium and introduce yourself and any relationship you have to the project.
Thank you. My name is Katie Mail. I am Sharon and Philip, the owners of the property's daughter. I grew up in the house that's on the land right now. And frankly, this project has been needed since I left for college 20 years ago. So we are in agreement with everything we've heard from our neighbors. I had in my notes to mention that what I thought our neighbors would be too kind to mention about the condition of the current home. I'm glad that they've been blunt and frank with you. The current home is in a state of disrepair. We started this project 5 years ago when my parents received very constructive feedback from the commission, which they've incorporated, or from the commissioners at the time, which they've incorporated. We then had to press pause on this project due to COVID. My parents holding off on this project so they could help me raise 2 small children while I still pursued my career, and my mom becoming the primary caretaker of her terminally ill brother. But during that time, they've deferred much needed maintenance on this home, and this project is needed now more than ever. The current house there is old, it's outdated, and to be honest, it makes me nervous that my aging parents go up and down the steep driveway and stairs every single day. This project is needed for my parents, for their physical ability to get in and out of their home safely, for my own peace of mind, for our neighbors who have spoken overwhelmingly actually in support of the project, and for my own small kids who want to spend time in their grandparents' home, and for me who would like to drop them off in their grandparents' home as well. just to note that, you know, we've talked about that for 88 years, number 2 Dulles Park Road has looked over number 1. Gio, who's here and will speak in a minute, used to live in number 1 and now lives across the street. When he and I lived there as kids, number 2 looked over number 1. As we all know, that's the nature of what a hillside looks like, and there's simply no getting around that. That's what the street is built as. My parents have, over the past 5 years, while this project was on hold, worked with Bruce, who has been trying to retire, to put in place the recommendations that they received previously from the Design Review Commission. And I hope that you'll, you know, taking those into account and be respectful of what the previous commissioners advised my parents to do, and what they worked so hard with Bruce on. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second speaker slip is for Giorgio Tobade. Great.
Nicely done. Extra bonus points, what does it mean in Italian?
I should know. I don't actually know though.
Tell us.
October. It's right in there. Well, I feel like we kind of had like an old timer showdown. So I might be the youngest looking old timer in the area, born and raised, 45 years old. So I don't know if I got that trophy tonight, but, so like he said, the males, they have been like my second family growing up. I grew up in number 1, right where the house, you know, was talked about earlier. And so I've got a lot of stake in this neighborhood in general. And I'm actually, like they said, I'm actually excited for the male family. Like it's been a long time coming because even as a kid, I always remember being like, I don't think I should go on this deck, you know, like there's safety concerns. I don't know. We'll just hang out inside. So I saw the designs just recently. Mr. Mail came over and exposed a little bit more. And I wasn't really sure because the way that we found out about this was that we knew something had been going on, something shut down. But I think most people find out, you know, that a project coming up as they turn and they see stakes in the air and flags and you go, pardon my French, but you go, oh shit. What's going on, right? So you kind of like, I didn't actually know a lot of the homes in Lafayette, they go for sale, the owners go away. I felt a little sad because I thought you guys sold and we're off. And I was like, oh, they didn't say anything, crap. So then my wife and I, we've lived now at 1094 North Thompson. I don't know if you're able to show the slide of kind of like where we're at. But I've watched personally all of those homes over the years get redeveloped. And I've been living in, since I was 10 years old, we moved to 1094. And I'm now raising my family in this home right here as well. And you can kind of see, and it doesn't surprise me that number 3 and number 4 aren't really complaining about privacy because they're on the higher end. You don't really see it, but from the lower end, you really get a good view as to what the impact of privacy may look like, right? And I get it. And that's just kind of like why I want to have the conversation is like, I want this home. I want their dream home to be their dream home. I really do. They're really great people. They work hard, raising their kids. Katie's amazing. I'm actually happy to see her tonight. It's been a long time. And so I think I just have a couple concerns that maybe will be addressed. A lot of times our home takes the burden of a lot of the homes that have been developed over the years. Number 4, when it was built, we have a pool and a seismic yard. A lot of the watershed comes in, our basement sometimes floods. We end up taking a lot of the seismic burden that really doesn't get considered at homes that have more of a distance. So when I hear, you know, 108,000 or 800 cubic feet of dirt, soil moved, it does raise concern. So the only thing I gotta make sure is we gotta also protect our investment as well. You know, we're at this house too, and I just wanna make sure like, you know, the males are people that I know, but over time, I don't know what's gonna happen. People move all the time. And so privacy of being able to look at this new development, but some males, I know them.
Excuse me, the time is over.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. But anyways, I appreciate the concern and I think just like taking a glimpse at like, I don't know if it needs to be scaled back. I don't wanna crush their dreams, but if it could come into your review and to see like what might accommodate a, you know, a little bit of a shift.
So your concern is about grading, how much?
Grading
Yeah.
and privacy
Okay,
and just the scope and the scale of it, if it makes sense for our neighborhood.
okay.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, I have a question for you, since you used to live at $1. What
Yeah.
are the rooms on that, in that house that they are facing $2?
I'm sorry, say that again?
These are 1094.
I know, but
Yeah, but
you
when I
used to
used to
live
live here,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
what were the rooms there? Are there bedrooms or?
So you'd be
living rooms?
surprised, they completely, redid the house.
Okay,
And it's gorgeous.
okay.
So, they kept it to the look of what it is, but I'm not 100% sure.
The floor plan, okay,
Unfortunately,
got
answer
it,
your question.
no worries,
Maybe
thank
the
you.
kitchen. The kitchen was.
The kitchen is facing your house,
There's a bedroom up there too.
Oh, did they look
Upstairs,
up
there was a
too?
bedroom.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a talker, sorry, I need like 5 minutes.
Oh, no, thank you very much. Sounds good. So the applicant has, how many speakers did we have? 6 total. So you have 30 minutes for rebuttal.
Technically, it is 5 minutes per response, but if you can keep it shorter, that would be better.
Yeah.
Please. Should I looked over and talked to the Hugo that lives at, there's 1090,
1108,
1108
directly behind us.
yesterday, and, just,
Sorry, if you don't mind, if you could just stand up there, introduce yourself and then.
we have to check the ID because I always forget. Hi, Bill Mayon, pardon me. I was just saying, I went and spoke to my neighbor Hugo, who was right behind a fence and a lot of foliage. See this?
1108.
Yesterday, and we had a nice talk and showed him the plans, and one of his concerns was he was afraid that we would be tearing out all the foliage that's probably 15 feet high between our house and their yard and theirs. And that's definitely not what we want to do. We're planning to keep that the way it is and hopefully expand it toward number one's fence, which is about an 8-foot fence there. But fill in that with foliage there too, which I think would make him feel a lot better. So I just had one thing that came up, but try to clarify. Bruce, you got something to say? Katie, you got something?
I don't think so. I think we covered it.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's maybe noteworthy, the comments from number 5, that she doesn't actually live there, that it's a rental, so I understand her concerns that her street will be torn up, which might deplete the value of her rental for a single year while the project is underway.
Sure.
So that might be worth noting, because she was very concerned about her attachment to that property, and she doesn't actually live there.
Oh, number 4 is up there, right there.
Yeah.
Which one?
4.
Okay. Thank you. So with that, we are gonna move on to commissioners' comments. Who wants to go first?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I actually like them answered, okay? You know, DRC didn't like it because it didn't meet the design guidelines for step back and all that, but it's so unique, you know, and we don't have that in Lafayette. I liked it, but it didn't go through. And, I have mixed feelings about this, okay? I mean, there's part of me that looks at this and I say, why are you building 4,000 square foot house on this tiny little parcel? When parcel 3 is almost double the size and it only has a 4,000 square foot house. 4,000 square foot house. It's a huge house, okay? Articulation is good, setbacks are good, detailing is good. Windows are big. Windows are looking down on number 1. I don't see how you can make those windows less functional and more privacy, okay? I mean, it's almost like you've opened up the picture window looking in the backyard of number 1. That's what it looks like to me. When you put up that slide where the flags are and all that, and you see the existing house with only a little bit of window or door or whatever looking down, and then suddenly now you have windows, huge windows looking down on there. You know, there's no comparison between what you had before on visibility and what you have now. That's my biggest concern, you know. Staff says we'll make it the same size as the one on the right. I think the one on the right's too big. Okay, I mean, it's like a picture window. You're just looking right down on everything in number 1. They have no privacy whatsoever. But they never did have privacy completely because you're
That's right.
uphill from that,
We've always looked down on that house.
yeah.
There was no fence.
So
for 20 years.
I have less concern about the height, okay? And I understood your drawing for supporting the roof slope that you have. I just think that when I look at this facade right here, it just is too much window. It's just taken away their privacy completely. And putting a couple trees on the 10-foot wide property line is not gonna, you know, it's not gonna scale it out, okay? Not very quickly. You know, I mean, you can put some evergreen trees in there. But, now in regards to the road, just as a clarification, private road, so we have no control. The city has no control over that. So any damage that's done, you know, like the attorney said at number 3, you should have an agreement. You don't have an agreement. You can still write an agreement, you know, but it's your responsibilities. As far as runoff, again, there's the city engineers asked for retention on the property. I agree with the conditions that they were asked for the back patio, protection of that one tree, the retaining wall, all that seems to be working out acceptably. But the one thing that doesn't seem to be acceptable to me is that high visibility of, or loss of privacy on that facade. Okay,
Thank you. We're gonna move on to the next commissioner.
I would, oh, sure. I agree with Glenn. It's my first time seeing this project. It's really big. For the lot. It just feels disproportionate. I'm a big fan, big proponent of it's your dirt, do what you want, but it just feels like too much. And maybe you can get there, you know, plant a bunch of trees on that sideline. You know, maybe downsize those windows. But it's a lot for 0.16 acres and on a hillside. The drainage, you know, defer to the city engineer, obviously. But 120 cubic yards of, and it's just going away. It's a lot of dirt getting pulled out of that hill. So I'm torn on this one.
Thank you.
Well, I do agree with both of the other commissioners. This is a lot of house for a small piece of land. And I was here in 2020 for the review that we did then, not the initial study session in 2019. And I see that you did respond to some of our comments, and I have different feelings than Glenn on this design. I'm pleased to see the direction that you've gone. I wish it were more, especially on the south side. South right is toward number 1, is that right? Sorry, west side. The west side, you stepped back this much on the first floor. Which is, and the horizontal expression that breaks up the height, I think is a very significant improvement from what we saw in 2020. That said, your first floor above the garage is still very close to your neighbor. And I would have liked to see that go further back. But I'm glad to see did you increase the setback on the upper floor?
Yes, both.
So I think that is helpful. Certainly, the size of the windows is a concern that I agree with my colleagues on. I would like to see both of those smaller and ideally you can't do a barrier landscape, but you can be strategic if you don't have to cover quite that much facade. So I would appreciate seeing that. I don't think you need to change your roof pitch. I think when you're below the house, the roof recedes. I don't believe it contributes that much to the apparent height. And your comment that you're able to do a lower upper plate height by using the roof the way you have, I think is very helpful. So I have no concerns there. I don't like to say no to people who are trying to develop their property. I mean, we're not here to be obstructive. We're here to make sure that everybody's thinking about being good neighbors. Yeah, I think it would help a little bit to step that first floor back more over that garage. I think I can see why it would be challenging to do that. And I guess I would say I'm willing to put up with the building. I think it's too big for that property. I do think it is. With some additional minor mitigations, I do see that you've been responsive to earlier comments. Regarding the grading, I trust that if your retaining walls that are part of the house are properly engineered, and the other engineering comments from our city engineer are addressed, I don't have concern over the amount of grading. The fact that you're pulling out that much dirt to snuggle your house into the hillside, I think is helping to some degree mitigate the square footage. And I think, regarding construction impact, I mean, not only do you and your neighbors have to agree on what might happen to the road and if there's damage due to construction, how that's worked out. I mean, you do need to make an agreement, I think. There's also a legitimate concern about blocking that little street during construction. And your contractors will need to have you'll need to define for them where they are allowed to park and what they can block and what they cannot block. I'd like to see the house go forward. I mean, certainly what is there right now is in dire need of being replaced. So those are my comments. Good luck.
Thank you. So I was on the commission when you first came for the hearing. I think it was late 2020. And I'm really pleased with what you've done with the house. I was always kind of curious what happened, to this project. And I'm really pleased with all the improvements that I see today to the design in terms of the massing, setbacks, more articulation, transition of the materials. I think it's all kind of heading the right direction. I shared the same concern about the size of the house in relation to the property. And it feels like, it's really filling up, the whole site, not leaving any breathing room. And when I'm looking at the plan and just the dimension of some of these rooms, I think there is room for just shrinking and shaving off, from the square footage. For example, master bedroom is 20 foot on one direction elongated, the bedroom 3 is 16 feet. So there is definitely room to just, make this a smaller house, but it's still function and, relevant to the size of the property. That's, I think, the most important thing that is going to help to improve and address some of the concerns about the privacy and reducing the size of the openings. I think that's also a great suggestion. I agree with John about the roof pitch. I don't think you need to change that. And thank you for these illustrations. And then I have one comment about the design. As you're looking at the kind of reshaping this and massaging the size a little bit, on the floor plan, if you continue that exterior wall of the bedroom 3 and just shave off, a little bit of that closet space, and you can work the stairs that you're coming up from the first floor, and just continue that line. And if you go to the rendering, I just want to look at it in the rendering. It's really going to break up the massing on the south elevation. Like imagine that kind of your roof line where it's above that living space with your frame window. If that continues and you're going to work out in the plan how you are going to have clear headroom for the stairs that they go up to the second floor, I think it's going to just break up the massing in a really nice way, step it back. It's going to reduce that kind of extent of that blank wall, that south facing. And it's gonna improve it significantly. So, that's just one suggestion I have to just further improve the massing of the house. But besides that, I think, everything is coming together really nicely. It just needs a little bit of massage and shrinking the square footage. So, with that said, I think we are gonna make a motion, but there's gonna be a lot of conditions being added. Staff conditions, the landscaping, I think we agree with that. Along the western edge. I think commissioners, they're okay with the roof pitch. To maintain the 6 to 12 roof pitch with the lower plate height on the second floor. And modifying the window sizes, I think that's in general, south facing and also west facing. As both of those neighbors, they have concern about the privacy. Other conditions? Are those the three ones? Okay. So I'm gonna make a motion. To,
I don't think we can continue this by February 15th or whatever it is.
No, at the applicant's preference.
right,
Yeah.
More time to address.
Yeah, we need more
stuff.
time.
yeah.
So we have options to continue to a date uncertain. That would require, once that date was determined, renoticing to neighbors. Or you can continue it to a date certain where noticing would not be required.
Let's try that.
Date certain.
A date certain. Have any?
Be 2 days or 3 days.
Too much.
Yeah, how many years?
Yeah.
March, it's gonna be.
Please don't make it 2030.
I'm starting to feel like Sarah Winchester.
So in February, the following date would be February 24th. And then in March, you have March 10th and March 24th.
Okay.
Yeah, let's try March 10th.
March 10th.
So we are gonna continue this for another hearing at March 10th.
We do need a motion and a second for,
Yeah.
from the commission to do
Sure.
that.
So moved.
Second.
Second, and do we need to vote for this? Yeah, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So we are gonna see you at March 10th. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
We're gonna move on to the next item, 9B S08-24, Marks Paint C zoning request for a sign permit to install one non-illuminated acrylic wall sign measuring 17.05 square foot and replace two 8.29 square foot polycarbonate panels in the existing non-illuminated monument signs.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We're just gonna take a moment to make sure we're set up correctly.
Sure, yeah, sounds good.
Everybody's leaving.
So they're all down.
I think Cameron twice, right? Do you remember? Yeah.
Just reading the comments from 2019.
And it got really bad, after it came for the second time, because, we made some comments, they went back and fixed it and came back and we made more comments. And they didn't come back. I really felt bad, like, But I think you improved the design so much.
Looks better than that.
There, that'll be the
Yeah.
shade
Yeah.
right there, and that'll be the new.
It's gonna get better.
It does work that way. You know, the one that we just had the hearing on, when you look at the first one, it was a rectangular box.
That's true.
And it's so much.
Yeah.
It looks good.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's massive.
Yeah, it's massive.
That's Sacramento. That, I don't think.
Yeah, we went in and got it in the box, but it is what it is.
Looks better than it could have been.
Okay, no, this is what's in the, and so then, but I have to show that.
So I do think we enhanced the designs.
Thank you for your patience. My name is Madison Leonard. I will be presenting SO8-24 Marks Paint. This is a sign permit at 3707 Mount Diablo Boulevard. The project site is located on the south side of Mount Diablo Boulevard between Village Center and Mountain View Drive. The site is zoned General Commercial C1, and the downtown specific plan designation is West End Commercial. The principal business frontage is approximately 50 feet in length and is identified by the red line on the north side of the building. The maximum sign allowance per our sign ordinance for a principal business frontage of this size is a total of 78 square feet of signage. The project proposes 2 signs identified by 1 and 2 in the picture. And the total proposed signage from this project equals just over 33 square feet. Therefore, the project complies with the provisions of the sign ordinance. First, I'm going to discuss sign number 1. The photo on the left is the existing conditions of the building. There is currently a temporary new business sign located on the building, along with some existing brackets from previous signage. The photo on the right is the proposed signage. There will be a new wall sign, specifically a shoebox cabinet, which is 120 inches in length and about 20 inches in height. The sign will read Benjamin Moore, Marks Paint La Marinda, and the colors will be consistent with Benjamin Moore corporate branding. Lastly, the sign will be placed directly beneath the existing light that's on the building. Moving on to sign 2. On the left, we have existing conditions. This is an existing monument sign with temporary Marks Paint panels. On the right, we have the proposed new signage. So the project proposes to replace the panels with new Benjamin Moore Marks Paint La Marinda in a blue color with white lettering. These colors were approved in a prior application at the site. The panels are 49 inches in length and 24 inches in height. As explained in the staff report, the existing monument sign at the building was approved for the purpose of identifying the second tenant within the building, which is located south of Marks Paint. It's that second space. Staff agrees with this determination, but is including a project-specific condition of approval that this monument sign be removed in the event that the building becomes one tenant. A notice of public hearing was sent out to properties within 300 feet of the project site and was also posted within the vicinity at least 10 days prior to this hearing. There is no public comment received for this project. Staff finds the application to be in compliance with the provision of the sign ordinance and recommend the DRC find the project exempt from CEQA and approve the project subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question for the staff?
Is Mark's Paint occupying both spaces now, or is one vacant?
One is currently vacant.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any raised hands? No. Sorry, there is no applicant, right? To present?
I believe that we have the applicant on Zoom.
Okay.
They're welcome to present if they have additional information with them.
We do now have a raised hand.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. So,
No other questions?
okay,
Sounds like it's the applicant that has their
Yeah.
hand raised.
exactly. So can we have the applicant present? Thank you.
Okay, Megan Schnorr, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, hi, my name is Megan Schnorr with Sequoia Signs and Graphics, and I'm representing Mark's Paint. They had two existing signs with the old tenant. One was facing the parking lot, and that has been removed, and we're just going with the one side on the facade that allows the vendors and clientele to access the building. It's non-illuminated, so really just a wayfinding sign of sorts. And that's it. Do you have any other questions? I mean, it's pretty
Thank you.
straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, do we have, no, I don't think there is any questions. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
with that, we're gonna move on to the commissioner's comments.
I have no comments.
No
comments.
I'm ready to approve.
Yeah,
Same here.
listening. So who wants to
Make
make a motion?
resolution to approve the existing design and proposal
And I second that?
and no CEQA revisions.
Yeah.
If I could ask you to rephrase it, we do want to always find the project exempt from CEQA first.
Yeah. Yes, please.
We have the language here if you'd like to. read it.
Categorically exempt from section 15311 accessory structures. Paragraph A, on-premise signs. The recommendation is to approve the project as designed.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So we approve the project condition, subject to conditions. And we are gonna move on to the next item. Our volunteer for Friday, January 31st.
I can handle that.
Thank you, Glenn. And summary of the tree protection ordinance update.
Yes, thank you. I do not have a PowerPoint for this. However, you did receive a staff report, and I'm going to kind of briefly skim over some of the major changes to help summarize the changes that have happened with our tree protection ordinance. Get into the correct spot. Okay, so as you guys are aware, we spent almost the past year, 2024, going through the process of updating our existing tree protection ordinance. This is an ordinance, obviously, to protect trees. The goal here is not to prevent the removal of any and all trees, but rather to make sure that those trees that are larger, more beautiful, more visible, those that contribute to the general beautification of Lafayette are well protected. And in the cases where for the ability of a property owner to develop, trees must be removed, they are replaced or replanted with replacement trees. That's the overarching goal of the tree protection ordinance that has been maintained. However, in light of our changing climate, concerns about fire, and the fact that our canopy coverage is actually quite robust and healthy, the council wanted to re-examine the tree protection ordinance and make some changes. So I'm going to go through and do them now. So I dropped into the staff report the notes that I created actually for staff in processing, given that the DRC will often be kind of going through a similar process and thought process when considering whether to allow for tree removals, and things like that. So the first key thing here is what's protected. This is not largely changed. It's slightly reorganized. So if you are spending time looking at the ordinance itself, previously, we actually described what's protected in the definitions, which is not where regulations should exist. We've now teased those apart. There are 4 groups of trees described in the definitions, but what is protected and why is described as a separate section of regulation. And so the 4 groups are excluded species that are almost never protected. I'll get to the almost part. And we don't want to see them replanted. They're fire prone or invasive. We've consulted with not only the city landscape consultant, but also I always forget the full name, but the Downtown Creeks committee, I believe, on invasive species and what they wanted to see there. So that's what that list is for. The 2 main lists you'll recognize are native species and native riparian species. Those still exist. However, native riparian species, we've cleaned up the definition to really make it more clear that it's not just the species, but when they are located within 30 feet of a creek top, a creek bank top. And that's because those trees can grow everywhere, but are more attracted to a heavier water system, and so are more likely to grow there. And we want to encourage that separate climb and kind of flora there. Native species, same list as before. However, the Oregon white oak has been added to that list. And then recommended species, this is something completely new. This is a pretty robust list that's actually broken into 3 size categories. And the goal of this list is to be what you can replace a native tree with. So if you're removing a native riparian species, previously you had to replace 1 for 1 the exact species. Now, native riparian does need to come from the riparian list, but it can be anything on that riparian list. A generally native species can be anything on the recommended list, as long as it is a size correspondent. So if your tree that's being removed has a mature growth, not existing, but mature possible growth of a large species, such as, a valley oak, then you need to replace it with another tree that is also from the large group. Unless an arborist says that's not the right size for this space, and we have a letter documenting that. So that's our main groups of trees. We made some tweaks to the size of what's protected where. So for example, on undeveloped properties, it used to be all trees at 6 inches were protected. Now it's just the native and native riparian, whereas all other species are protected at 12 inches. So a little bit of teasing apart there. And then we have one of the 8 conditions that protects trees is something that's on an approved application. And previously there was kind of a misunderstanding in our department that said any tree shown on an approved plan is automatically protected. That was not the original goal and is not in fact the language of the old or new ordinance. So we've clarified that really what we're trying to do is protect trees that provide a service, such as screening for privacy, holding a bank, things like that. So in past approvals, to help clarify which trees those are, we're going to look at conditions of approval, staff reports, minutes, what was discussed, and then also look at the site. So anything that was on that approved plan and discussed as important to remain would be protected. If it was never on the plan, it's not protected. And even if it was on the plan, but at the time did not seem important and now is, we can still deem it protected. However, we're trying to make it a lot easier than reading all those documents. So going forward, staff will always, in the conditions of approval, call out any tree that should be protected as a matter of the approval. The species protections will remain in place, but anything that wouldn't automatically be protected should be called out. So this is something where there's a conversation between staff and this body where we will make a suggestion in the conditions and hopefully be calling that out in our PowerPoints. And you can, of course, say, I don't think this is important, or what about this one? Let's add that in. It should all be very explicitly named in the conditions. So when we look back, we know exactly what is protected. Does that make sense?
That does. And does that meet the trees that they are a certain size and they're below, like, you know?
It doesn't matter. For species protection, like native and native riparian, it's a species of a certain size. When we're talking about approval, you can choose to protect any tree you want of any size if you feel it plays an important role and should remain. And then the last four categories, replacement trees, trees adjacent to a ridge line, street trees and downtown trees, those remain the same. No changes were made there. So they remain protected species.
In terms of the ridge line, is there a certain distance?
Yes, it's within the restricted ridge line. So a class 1 is 400 feet.
Sure.
Class 2 is 250. Class 3 does not have a distance.
Sure.
Okay, and then something that's pretty new is that in some cases, we are going to exempt trees from requiring a permit, or in some cases, ask for a permit so that we can track what's happening, but not charge the fee or maybe not require replacement trees. So I'll go through those. The first is excluded species. I mentioned this before. If it's one of those species that's invasive or fire prone, we generally don't care if it's cut down, except that we will look at past approvals to see if it plays an important role in privacy. In those cases, we would maintain protection for it, but only in those cases. If it's a street tree and it's fire prone, it would not have protection. So this trumps the protection, if that makes sense. Second category is any tree within 5 feet of an existing building or a structure that is attached to a building. This is called zone 0 when we're talking about defensible space. And it is the most important space to have non-flammable materials. And so we want to really respond to the defensible space guidelines that are going into place and becoming more enforced by our fire protection district, and make it easier for homeowners. This is what insurance often targets. My parents actually just went through this. They had to cut everything back 5 feet from the home. So that if you want to remove a tree that's in 5 feet or any portion that is within 5 feet, no permit is required. We're urging people to photo document, take a picture with a measuring tape so that if someone calls in, they have evidence of where it was located. But there's no permit or review required for removal of those trees.
And can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is it any part of the trunk, the 4 foot up, any part of the trunk that touches that 5 foot line?
That's correct.
Or is it
And
the
if
center of the?
It's anything within 5 feet with the understanding that that may cause the tree to die. Yes. So, you know, if they want to go ahead and cut it all down, that will probably achieve the end result, but it's not technically allowed. It's the 5 feet. And if the tree ends up dying, then they've got a photo saying this was within 5 feet and we can understand what happened. Similarly, right now, old code, new code, same thing, 25% is what you're allowed to prune before you need a permit. However, within 10 feet of a building or structure, you're allowed to do additional pruning, not going full-fledged and removing the whole tree, but taking the bushy part of the tree back quite a bit so that a 10-foot buffer sides and above on the roof can be created so that the most flammable part of the tree is not adjacent to the structure. And again, this was a suggestion from an expert that we consulted with from Cal Extension. They're studying a lot what the role is between structures and trees. The general consensus is that a tree is wood that's filled with water. A house is wood that's been really nicely dried. Generally speaking, fire does not pass from trees to buildings. Trees get damaged when the building burns down. That doesn't mean a tree cannot burn, and in a conflagration it will. But generally speaking, trees are not causing houses to burn. So, however, having some distance, if a tree's on fire, is going to help the house not catch. Right? A tree might have their leaves or needles on fire, but it survives. As long as it has that distance, the house can maybe stay not on fire because it doesn't reach that heat point, or the needles don't drop or things like that. So that's kind of what the needle we're trying to thread there. So those are work that does not require any permit or any checking in with the city. Separately, we want people to apply for a permit, but potentially not have to plant replacement trees for other conditions. So if a city maintained tree, needs to come out by the city, they do apply for a permit, but we wouldn't charge another department in the city a fee. If the tree is dead or dying, according to an arborist report that must be submitted with a permit, then we would not require any replacement trees or a fee. So we want the documentation, we want the application that says what address it happened at, and we want the arborist report proving that it was dead or dying, not caused by the applicant, natural causes. But then we allow that to come out without doing the usual fee and repercussions of replanting. And then there's additional street tree requirements. If there's the city's repairing a sidewalk, and we've issued a letter to the owner and it's gonna damage or kill a tree, then that tree can come out. Again, arborist report proving that it will die because of the sidewalk or within 2 years because of impacts. And then similarly to what we have, if the applicant submits a notice from Contra Costa County Fire Protection District, or CONFIRE as we often call them, saying that anything, vegetation, tree must come out, we allow it. We want the documentation, but there's no fee and no replacement trees required. The whole point is to remove that vegetation. It's typically, they're looking at defensible space. Just as a refresher, defensible space has zones, and they're based on the distance from the home. So the 5 feet I mentioned earlier, that's zone 0, where there should just be nothing. They often want you to put gravel or concrete, just nothing. And then from 5 feet to 30 feet is zone 1. And that's where vegetation is okay. You want to be careful about what you plant, how you maintain it, but it should not be continuous and it should not go right up to the structure. So having a blob of trees and bushes, fine. And then another blob over here, but you don't want to just have a house encircled by trees and shrubs. So that's kind of maintaining it. And then out to 100 feet is zone 2, where more vegetation is fine, but again, maintaining it, trimming it, making sure that there's a low shrub and then a high tree and not a continuous ladder for flame to climb up. These are the things that they're looking at. So the fire department is doing, at this point, non-enforceable inspections in our very high fire hazard severity zone, which, if you recall, is about half the town. It's most of the town north of 24, a section to the west of the reservoir, the terraces, but not further east, close down to 24. And then there's this little section at the very southeast corner. All of that's in this very high fire hazard severity zone. CONFIRE is doing inspections and giving people information. It's likely the state will soon make it a requirement to maintain 2 defensible space standards. CONFIRE will be maintaining that, and they will give the letters, and then the applicants can submit to us and say, I have to remove this, and then we will allow it.
Do you know time estimates for that? Or
My
ballpark?
understanding is it may be as soon as next year, but these things have slipped quite a bit, so.
They're not doing any consulting yet.
Sorry?
CONFIRE is not doing any consultant, any inspections.
Really? Okay,
yet.
so I think they had the intention
They
to go
have,
this fall.
yeah, they have a notice on their site that
Mhm. Didn't happen.
stay tuned.
Yeah.
I did get a letter from them. They looked at the front of my property,
Okay.
but no more.
Yes. Yeah, so oftentimes, they won't enter a property without permission, so they'll come by. And if you're not there, they will do a visual inspection from the street and they will not enter and look at the rear or anything like that. The ordinance does include 2 sections on category 1 and 2 permits. The category 1 tree permit is a standalone permit where all you're doing is removing trees, and that's typically reviewed just at a staff level. Category 2 is when you're removing trees as part of a development application. There's a design review or an HDP, it all goes together. That's when you guys are seeing it. The vast majority of language in these 2 sections describing the process is exactly the same. Very few changes there, mostly clarification. Moving on to mitigation, number 4 in the staff report. This did change quite a bit. We had a fairly complex ratios and multiplication computation to decide how many replacement trees based on the diameter you had to do. We've clarified this a lot. So the council originally was leaning just to a 1-to-1 ratio and eventually decided based on that diameter that there would actually be 3 levels. So if the removed tree is less than 24 inches, you plant 1 replacement tree. If it's from 24 to less than 30, you plant 2. And anything with a diameter of 30 or greater, you plant 3 replacement trees. And again, this would be coming from that recommended tree list as far as species. Location will always be on the same property. Never within 5 feet of the building. We're trying to keep that zone 0 clear. And then in the public right of way, there are some additional requirements about how close it should be, as close as possible without interfering with infrastructure and things like that. So I explained the species, again, native riparian, if that's the removal group, you can plant anything from that group. If it's a non-native riparian, but a native tree, then anything from the recommended list, size appropriate. Timing is clarified. Typically, we just wanted people to plant them and tell us give us some photo proof that it happened. But we're trying to be more sensitive to the appropriate planting time, which is the rainy season. So going forward, category 2, which is what you review with development, will continue to be on the project schedule. That's a little hard to manipulate. We're not going to hold off on signing off on permits when they're trying to get their final. But for category 1, which is staff review standalone, trees should be planted between October and April. They should be planted within 60 days of approval or by the end of the calendar year, whichever time period is longer. And we need proof within 30 days that it was planted. If that proof doesn't come, we deem the permit unsatisfied and they are in violation, which I'll get to violations in a moment. And then there are cases where no replacement trees are required if the tree is exempt. We talked about exempt trees. And then, sorry, let me back up. The big change for mitigation is that there are no longer any in lieu fees. The tree either goes in or we have a letter from the arborist saying why it can't go in. There's no paying your way out of planting. So the arborist can state that planting additional trees on the property would adversely affect the health of existing or new trees. Additional trees would result in closer spacing than recommended by defensible space guidelines. We had a lot of discussion about who should be determining that. We decided staff is not equipped to be following these constantly updated rules, so we're going to ask arborists to do it. And then 3, if the only place to plant is in that zone 0, the first 5 feet by the building. So if an arborist says any one of those conditions exist, then we will forgive whatever trees cannot be correctly and healthily planted. They just don't have to plant them.
Why not defer to CAL FIRE or CON FIRE, whatever?
They are the ones that establish defensible space, but we're gonna they're not available for individual tree consultations. So the arborist is in charge of using those definitions to determine when a tree would interfere with defensible space or not.
Are they unavailable or unwilling? 'Cause I feel
Both
like,
understaffed.
yeah.
They don't.
I can promise you that they will not go
They
out
don't
and look at.
I know they wouldn't want to, but it would almost be like an incentive for you not to choose that path
Mhm.
if it's really onerous to get it approved by CAL FIRE.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not.
I think this was again an attempt from council especially to be a little more sensitive to concerns about fire and insurance. And if an arborist is telling us there's no room, this makes it, we fall out of the category of defensible space, then just allowed to proceed. And so the last category of updates here is for violations and penalties. Previously, if the tree ordinance was violated, meaning someone cut down a tree without a correct permit, they had to apply for a permit and go through the normal process, and they also had to plant more trees. We've removed that requirement. Instead, they pay fees. So they still have to apply and go through the normal process and replace trees as required by the ordinance, but they also pay fees. And those fees are scheduled to be a specific dollar amount based on the size of the removed tree. If more than one tree is removed at a time, each tree will be fined separately and summed. And if a separate removal event occurs, it will be deemed the second violation and fees will double continuously for every event. Now, the reason it's an event and not a tree, because someone might cut down some very small trees on a vacant lot, they still are protected, and they've cut down 10 trees and then suddenly there's 10 times, it doesn't make sense. We tried to be thoughtful about when does it become obvious that someone should maybe check with the city, and smaller trees are less obvious, bigger trees become more obvious. So we wanted to think about when to trigger what trees. Now, if the same owner on the same property cuts down a tree, pays a fee, didn't know, and then comes back a year later and cuts down another tree without a permit, that's a second event and fees have doubled. It is gonna be per owner, per property on that doubling. And those fees are all in the thousands of dollars. So we're trying to be serious here. In addition, when there's a violation, we can issue a stop work order. We can restrict any further development permits from being issued for up to 5 years if they're not processing the required, they're not submitting the required permit. And then there's also the additional fees, of course. So that summarizes the main changes. All of these are in the ordinance that are online. I've linked everything to the staff report. We as staff will try to be clear about what's triggering what in our reports so that it's clear, especially when we're using new code. But please do ask if you have any questions.
What triggers the size replacement?
So based on the size of what came out, that's how many trees you have to replace with, 1, 2, or 3. And the eventual mature growth of the removed tree corresponds to the group that you can choose from recommended trees. So if it was, I used Valley Oak before, a tree that gets quite tall and large, that's a large tree. You must replace it with trees from the group of large trees on the recommended list. And I think there's 8.
15 gallon or 24
Always
inch box?
Yeah, always 15 gallon. Always a minimum of 15. They can go higher if they want, but they don't get extra credit for it.
Okay.
So it's just numeric. It's 15 gallon.
So there is nothing kicking them up to 24.
Correct. There's no exchange rate or
Okay.
things like that. Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Any other questions?
Sorry to keep you guys late, but I've got one quick question. Going back to vacant, undeveloped land, why is it that every tree is protected? It feels counterintuitive to fire safety.
That's fair. I think the idea is that a lot of the vacant properties have been enjoyed as a type of open space, whether there's actual access to them or not. It's a kind of green space visually for people. And so the goal is to not lose that kind of lush planted appearance when someone moves in. Now, again, all other trees, so native and native riparian, are protected at 6 inches diameter. All other trees are protected at 1 foot. So that's a fairly large tree. So even if it's not a desired species, it's still.
Oh, we're talking yeah, okay.
It's diameter.
I thought you meant saplings. I was like, why on earth would we care about it?
We measure the diameter in
Yeah.
inches at 4.5 feet.
Got it.
That's how we determine kind of the size of the tree.
Are bay laurels still on the protected native list?
I believe they are. We discussed whether to try to remove them or not. There's a lot of love for them. There are, spreaders of sudden oak death. There's some flammability issues, but we ended up not taking that on.
That's too bad.
It was.
Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of love for them as a native species. And so people did still want to kind of see them around. Any other questions?
No, thank you so much.
Yes.
You can open it to the public?
Yeah, please.
Okay, you want me to go up there, or is it okay if I speak from here?
So, sorry, what's this? What's
About the tree permit. about
Oh,
the
yeah,
trees.
please, go
Okay,
ahead.
sure. My name is Joseph Gorney, architect, and it's funny, one of the questions I do have in this is when it's gonna be implemented. We're
It's
working
in
on.
effect now.
What's that?
It's in effect now.
It is in effect now. And we have, well, I'll get to that later, because we have a project that just got through deemed complete. And it's one of the, I'm really glad you're doing this because, we have a small lot with some large trees on it. And, if you use the city's requirements, like if you have a 19-inch tree, it's 3.17, which you have to round up the 4 and then multiply by 2. And then if you can't actually put the trees on the site, you have to pay the in lieu fee. So on this property that my clients have, it's 35 feet wide, which you'll be seeing in about a month or so. It's like $8,840 of mitigation of in lieu fees. And we have one particular 48-inch tree that we're trying to save. And if we had to take that one out, it would be $13,000 of mitigation fees. So I'm really glad that you're doing this because there's no way we could fit that on this site. So
For clarity, your project was probably submitted before the new ordinance went into effect, meaning it came in under the old ordinance, which means that it was processed under the old ordinance.
so there's your $8,600. Okay, so that's good, but still, maybe I can pull it off and do it again. I don't know, maybe. So I'm glad you're doing this. Again, I was wondering when it was gonna be implemented. I think the changes are good, particularly on that, how you're gonna figure out the mitigation or not do mitigation. It's gonna be interesting when you have cross property line trees. If somebody's has a tree here and it's 2 feet from the neighbor's property, they're gonna be allowed to cut it at their fence line or at 5 feet. Also, in the first one, I think second one you had today, there was talk of adding trees for privacy mitigation, I believe like in an 8-foot setback. How do you do that on some of these projects if you're adding trees? I know that on ours, the city landscape guy wanted us to put an oak tree in the front yard as a mitigation tree, but my landscape architect said it's too close to the house. There's a fire ladder effect and he didn't want to do it. He wanted to use a maple or something that's kind of holds more water. So I'm glad that you're dealing with the fire thing. That's really going to be critical. I mean, I was on design review in Walnut Creek for 21 years, so I dealt a lot with tree ordinances and we did different things. And so that's it. I just wanted to say I'm glad you're doing it. And we have trees that are literally 19-inch twig that comes out and there's 2 leaves on the end. And because of that, we have to do 8 mitigation trees at $525. So I'm hoping they're adding some kind of a discretion in there as to what really constitutes a tree. But if you're saying that if the arborist deems it as not savable, then you don't have to pay for mitigation, that sounds like, or it's dying. That sounds like
Dying
a
or
good
dead.
change. So thank you for making the changes. It sounds like it was about a month too late for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And with that, we are going to move on to next item, 10C, elections for chair and vice chair. Who wants to nominate?
Well, Richard's not here
Don't we
tonight,
need
huh?
Stanton? I think we need Stanton.
I think the
here.
chair would be clear. Glenn
That's right.
is gonna be next chair. So it's the question for election of the next vice chair. Right?
Can we nominate Richard in absence or somebody else?
Yeah, I think we can do that. That's his punishment for going on the cruise.
I'm not putting that on record.
Huh?
I'll
I'll nominate Richard for vice chair.
Have you had a conversation with him if he wants to do that or?
Oh, he will want to do it.
Okay.
Why wouldn't he?
We could give him the opportunity to say, I'd rather wait another year, but I don't think he'll say that. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I endorse that. I'm just asking if we nominate Rich and vote and then he comes back and says, he doesn't
We
feel.
can always
comfortable. Okay.
re-agendize it.
Yeah.
It would delay things a little bit because it would be the next meeting when he says so, and then
Right.
we would agendize it for the
Right.
next meeting, but. I don't
I
think
really
there's a
doubt
huge-
that, but I think, yeah.
I don't think there's a huge
It's-
problem.
But in
Good
any
to know.
case, if Glenn manages to get the votes here, he'll be on for next time.
So we do need a motion. It can be for both together. I think that's fine, but a motion, a second, and a vote.
Sure, I make a motion to nominate Rich as the next vice chair and Glenn as the next chair.
I would second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Congrats, Glenn.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
And with that, Do we have any commissioners' reports? No. Staff
No,
liaison
I did
report?
my 700 form,
Yeah,
To do mine.
good.
oh god.
Yeah, great, thank you. The meeting adjourned.
Thanks. I don't know, after 9:30.
Yeah, this was.